Yes, I'm back. This is Help from Pros Before Bros, and I took a 2 week into 2 months break. Yeah, I was going to take 2 weeks, and then I came 2 months, and here we are now. So yes, I apologize for that. One of the books I'm talking to is going to relate to that theme right there. But I am back, and I am happy to be back. So welcome. If you guys are existing viewers, welcome back. If you guys are new to my channel, welcome. Feel free to subscribe below or leave your comments, and yeah, we'll just hop right into why I'm making a video. So I did take a break, obviously, and that was just to kind of focus on me a little bit. I felt like I was getting a little wrapped up in my booktube community essentially, and I just needed to take a break and enjoy reading for what it was and not feel so overwhelmed and so pressured. And sometimes when you have a channel like this and you're dealing with, big dogs, that have 30 plus thousand subscribers, it can be a little bit downing. But I'm back and I'm going to focus on just enjoying the ride. So I am going to talk to you guys about some of the books I read in the past 2 months. This is a small list, very condensed list of books I read, and I'm going to do like a pyramid. So I'm going to tell you guys about some of the books that I didn't like, and it's going to be at the bottom of the period, and then we're just going to gradually work our way up to the top. I got this idea from a beauty person. What is it called? A YouTuber? Beauty tuber? I don't know. But she's one of my favorites on the YouTube channel, and her name is Thick Thrift. So she has this thing where she does the best and worst of beauty. She has a little jingle. I'm not even going to try to make my own jingle today because I'm so tired. But yeah, we're going to just jump right into it. So working our way from the bottom to the top. The first book on the bottom of my pile is a book that I picked up with my niece's insistence. She is a huge fan of this woman, and I always try to find a book that I could read along with her to kind of have a conversation with her about. Alrighty, this is becoming a snooze fest. I'm sorry. This book is by Rachel Hollis, and the book is called Girls Stop Apologizing. So you guys probably remember me talking about Rachel Hollis in a few videos back. She wrote the book. It's her first book out, and it was called Girl Wash Your Face. So I liked that book. It was okay. I think I gave it like 3.5 stars. This is her sophomore book. And it basically is about a shame-free plan for embracing and achieving your goals. Yeah, that's what it's about. But it felt like I picked up Girl Wash Your Face, and it was just a reiteration of that. I just was not a fan of this book. I felt like it was very preachy almost, very repetitive to what she said in the past, both on social media and both inside her previous book. And I feel like she was probably trying to meet the deadline of the publisher, because she talks about that quite a few times inside this book. And I'm just like, you're not setting yourself up in a good light here. It just sounds like you wrote this book just to meet the quota. So I wasn't a huge fan of this book. I ended up giving it, I think, 3 stars on Goodreads, but honestly, it's more like 2.5. Was not a fan. So, sorry, Rach. Wait, I'm not sorry. Because, you know what? Hashtag, girl, I'm stopping my apologies. You knew better. You knew better. You should have did a little bit more on that book. But anyway, next book on the list. Don't come for me, guys. If you guys are Katrina Leno fans, do not come for me. It's her new book, and it is You Must Not Miss by Katrina Leno. Now, this name Katrina Leno might sound familiar because she was a 5-star book that I read last summer, and it was called The Summer of Salt. Love that book. It is an amazing book. If you haven't read it, you should pick it up now. In fact, it was so good that I ended up during one of my book swaps. I had book swap last year with, maybe it was last fall. It was with Julie from Pages and Pens. That was the book I sent her, and she sent me another book. And it ended up being one of her top read books. She really enjoyed it. Chelsea from Chelsea Darling Reads talks about that book all the time. She loves it. I believe Mel from Melted Any really enjoyed that book as well. A lot of booktubers loved Summer of Salt. This I was not too much of a fan of, and I feel so bad because Chelsea from Chelsea Darling Reads, I believe she really enjoyed this book. It just wasn't my cup of tea. So the book You Must Not Miss follows the story of a girl by the name of Margaret Lewis. She goes by Magpie. Magpie has a very rough, very difficult life. She is failing out of high school. She walked in on her father, who was having sex with her aunt. It was his sister-in-law, so it wasn't incestuous, but it kind of was. Anyways, she walked in on him, and then shortly before this occurred, she was sexually assaulted by not a stranger, but her former her former best friend's boyfriend. I'm getting myself mixed up. Her former best friend's boyfriend. She was sexually assaulted by. And in addition, she isn't really a child in this book. Unfortunately, she has to grow up really quickly and be a caregiver to her mother, who has become a raging alcoholic because of her husband or ex-husband's infidelity. So it's a very dark book. It's very dark. It's very twisted. But the storyline goes that in order for Magpie to find some solace, she writes in this yellow notebook about this town called Near. She lives in Near, her friends and family live in Near, and everything is nearly perfect, or so it seems. So it does have some very dark themes in it. Near becomes a reality in a sense. And ideally, it's kind of interesting, but at the same time, felt like this book was lacking. So at the end, near the end, you have kind of the element of surprise where it's like a suicide by fire, so to speak, if you guys have ever heard that terminology, with the main character. I'm not going to go into too much detail just in case you want to read this. It just turns very dark and very twisty. And I think the reason why I did not really fall in love with this book is because some of Katrina's books in the past, even though they have very dark subject matters, they have kind of a lighthearted, happy ending. And this one, for me, just felt kind of flat. It was kind of, it was alluded something dark may have happened to the main character, but it doesn't really go into too much detail about that. So I struggled so hard with this book, and I think a part of that is because it was a departure from what I'm used to from Katrina Leno, but also I was dealing with a lot of personal turmoil as well. I had recently found out that one of my best friends had passed away, and she actually lived in Alabama. We were actually writing partners for the past 6 years. So having that happen and reading this book at the same time was not very good for my mental health. It's a very tough read. I ended up giving this 3 stars on Goodreads, and I think it would be a solid 3 stars. It just wasn't my cup of tea. I'm sorry, Katrina Leno, and I'm sorry to your fans. If you, like I said, don't come for me. I really tried to like this book. It just wasn't for me, and that happened. So putting that one aside, the next book on the pyramid that I want to talk about is Next Year in Havana by Chanel Clayton. This has actually been talked about quite a bit. It's a Reese's. I always say Reese's because, candy. Come on. Reese's Book Club selection. And a lot of people has been talking about this. I think Chelsea talked about this a little bit. There's been quite a few booktubers that have been talking about this book. The book's premise is it breaks off into two different time frames. So it's two different locations, two different time frames. The first time frame is Savannah, 1958, with the main character being Elise Perez. And then we fast forward to Miami and Havana in 2017 with another character by the name of Marisol, who happens to be Elise's granddaughter. It follows the story of the revolution in 1958. Elise ends up falling in love with a lawyer revolutionary who is he's not in her particular clique. Like, she comes from a very high society clique. And of course, with him being a revolutionary during this time in Cuba is very turbulent. And she was basically in a forbidden romance. So we have that aspect. And fast forward to Marisol. Marisol goes to Cuba to deliver Elise's remains back to her home country because that's what her dying wish was. During this time, she ends up meeting somebody there, and I can't remember his name. Isn't that terrible? Try not to sneeze. I feel like I'm going to sneeze, so we're going to try not to do that. Let's see. Where is... Oh, Juan. His name's Juan. So she meets this young man by the name of Juan, and within literally 3 days or less, she ends up falling in love with him. Like, they say, I love you and stuff. So, yeah, it's very fast paced. And that's where I kind of did not like this book. I love the excerpts from 1958. I really enjoyed going back into the history and reading about Elise and her life in Cuba during one of the most crazy times in Cuba's history, one of the most prevalent times that has left ripples ever since, clear up to this point. Even today, there is a lot of drama behind Cuba, and just, yeah. So that was very interesting. Now, when you go into the 2017 portion with Marisol, I feel like it was really fast paced. Like I said, she falls in love with this guy she just literally met. Like, as soon as she gets off the airplane, and then she gets upset because she finds out he's married, all within like 5 minutes. And the marriage thing is very complicated. I'm going to leave that to you guys if you want to read this book. I'm not going to go into that drama. I touched on that. But yeah, it was just too fast paced for my liking. I wanted it to slow down a little bit in that particular area because I felt like things were just moving really unrealistically too quick. Is this a horrible read? Would I throw it to the side and never read again? Absolutely not. It was still a decent read. It's just one of those books that I would say that I want to enter it really seriously. I want to be super invested and think this is going to be like a compelling read. I would probably say it's a great book to take on vacation with you. It's a great book to have by the pool with you so you can read it. It's one of those. Didn't necessarily hate it. Didn't absolutely love it either. So I ended up giving it 3 stars on Goodreads. And I feel like that is a fair assessment. So moving on up the tier, we are going to go into a book that I was really hoping I would enjoy. And that is You'd Be Mine by Erin Hahn. Now, I got this in my very last book box with Second Star Books. After that, they completely phased out into another business direction. I'm still mourning the loss of that book box. But, anyways, You'd Be Mine follows the story of, well, it's loosely based on the story of June Carter and Johnny Cash. Huge fan of both. I was raised on them. So I was really excited about picking up this book. Now, hiccups. Oh my God. Um, Now, a lot of people DNF this book because of the slow pace. We're going to talk about that here. So we follow the story of Annie Mathers and Clay Coolidge. Annie Mathers is essentially June Carter. She doesn't really want to be in the spotlight necessarily, but she does it as a favor to Clay, who is our counterpart, I guess. He would be considered our Johnny Cash, and he's going through a very hard time. Record company kind of put him over a barrel and said, if you don't get Annie to go on tour with you, we're done with you because you have really effed up your career. So she comes on tour with him as a favor. And it's very slow burn. They develop a relationship over time, but then all of a sudden it gets really fast. So it's slow burn at the very beginning. Then we get to the part where Clay realizes he needs to change his lifestyle, his life, or he's going to go completely down the wrong path. He does this, and then bam, a few months later, they're together. So you don't really get to see any more of the relationship developing. It goes that they might have feelings for each other to they are in a relationship, and that was the part that just kind of held me back. I really wanted to see the piece, of them being in a relationship itself or becoming close enough that they could have that relationship. And it lacked that. It lacked that, and I wish I was able to see that. In addition, Annie had a little bit of involvement in his recovery, but not so much that it reminded me of June Carter. So I wasn't a huge fan of it. I wish I could have a little bit more. Now let's talk about the people that's DNF in this book. I can understand why they DNF'd it because it is a very, very slow paced book. At the very beginning, they talk about their daily interactions, their daily lives, and I, for one, enjoy that. To an extent, I enjoy it. I like to read about just people's everyday life. So it didn't really faze me none. I found it enjoyable where others did not find it very enjoyable. They found it kind of boring. So, yeah, I'm going to leave it with you guys on that. I ended up giving it 3 stars on Goodreads, but realistically, I think I would have been okay with giving it 3.5 stars. Next book is another book that you guys have asked me to read quite a while, and that book is Made by Stephanie Land. Made is a book, it's a memoir based on Stephanie's life, and she discusses her life as a single mother and working for minimum wage as a maid, a housekeeper to many people. So she cleans toilets and she gets down and does the stuff that other people don't want to do, and it's a very interesting story. It very reminiscent to the book Nickeled and Dimed that was released quite a few years ago by Barbara Ennerich. I want to say I might be messing up her last name. It's very reminiscent to that, except for this portrayal is very true. Where Barbara was doing undercover, Stephanie is doing this every single day for several years. So Stephanie talks about the very beginning where she is just this young, flighty girl who gets in a relationship and she thinks she's in love and she's going to do all these great things and go to college and become a writer. And she ends up getting pregnant, and it's very unexpected. And it's very unwanted by her boyfriend at this time, the father of the child. And it talks about violence. It talks about, not violence, abuse. Talks about dealing with abuse and dealing with um, being a single mother and trying to raise your child when the other partner doesn't want any involvement with that child or uses that child as a bargaining chip. So it's very detailed in that sense. It's very depressing. It was really, really sad read. But it was very uplifting in the end because she talks about how she finally, after several years of working and struggling to survive, how she finally was able to go to college on a full ride scholarship of sorts. And she was able to build a life for her and her daughter, a life that they could be proud of. But she talks about struggling to pay rent. She talks about struggling to put food on the table and not having any sort of support from family members. Her parents are basically non existent. Um, it's kind of sad, but it's inspirational at the same time because you see this good outcome in the end. I will say that I have a hard time rating these kind of books because they're memoirs. So I feel like I'm rating somebody's life, and that's just not my style at all. Writing wise, I would probably rate this at like a 3 or a 3.5. And the reason for that rating is because I feel like there was more that she could have put inside the story. She could have easily put out another 200 pages, I think, discussing, what it was like to work in these certain clients' houses. Like there was one client that she talked about that had a wife that died of cancer, and she called his house like the broken hearts house or something like that, the heartbreak house, something of that nature. And I feel like she talked vaguely about this house, but she didn't really talk about her relationship with this particular client. And I feel like she could have offered just a little bit more. Maybe I could be overreading it, and maybe she had more in there that she probably couldn't discuss because of privacy reasons or whatever. I just felt like there could have been a little bit more that she brought in. Is this a terrible book? Absolutely not. I would recommend anybody reading this, especially if you've had a life of privilege where you didn't have to work a very hard, demanding job, where you didn't have to worry about where your next meal was coming from. This might be a book you should pick up. It's very humbling to read her perspective. So yeah, I would, thinking back on it, I'd probably go as far as giving it at least a 4-star. I just wish there was just a little bit more in there. Otherwise, it is a very good book. All right, next book on the list here is a book that I keep saying that I'm going to come back to and I'm going to read. I did an audio book of it a few months ago, and I gave it like a 3-star rating. Said it probably wasn't my cup of tea, but I should go ahead and revisit it inside a print format, which I did. And that is Nosferatu. I keep messing that up. By Joe Hill. And honestly, Joe Hill is the son of Stephen King. You guys know I love Stephen King. But I decided to pick this up again because they have released a TV show on this book, and it follows the story of Vic McQueen, or Victoria McQueen, she's kind of gifted in the sense that she's able to find things that could never be found. And her goal is to find her son, who is kidnapped by this vampiric character and taken to a place called Christmas Land where children are undead. Very creepy shit. I love this book. Like I said, I gave it 3 stars when I listened to the Audible of it. However, I came back to revisit it in print because Audible, sometimes you can miss a lot of things. And it's a very lengthy book. After that, I went ahead and purchased this book, read it again, and I really enjoyed it. I actually gave it 4 stars. So this book is worth it. Pick it up if you like that kind of stuff. Last book, last but not least on the top of our pier. top of our tier. Good Lord. I thought I was going to hate this book. I absolutely love this book. And that book is Lovely War by Julie Berry. Now, Julie Berry has written a lot of historical fiction. I wasn't sure I was going to like this book because it has a lot of Greek mythology discussion in it. And I wasn't a fan of Greek mythology when I was a kid. Was not really a fan of it now, so I was really hesitant. But then I was like, I'm hearing people talk about this book. I need to pick it up. So, Lovely War follows the story of, it opens with the love goddess Aphrodite. She's having an affair with another god. Don't ask me that god's name. I can't remember. And she is trying to plead her case to her husband about how he needs to be more empathetic and more loving. And I believe her husband's the god of war, if I remember correctly. And that she wouldn't have an affair had he not shown her some sort of affection. So we follow her telling this case, and she's talking about how war can have its lovely aspects. So it focuses on World Wars One and World Wars Two, mostly World War One. Some of the characters that we meet are a couple named James and Hazel. I can remember them off the bat. And there was another couple. Why can't I remember? I think it was Audrey, maybe? It's been a month since I read this. So it was Audrey and Colette. And it's an interracial couple, which was really cool to see that because you don't really see that in historical fiction. And it talks about their time in Europe where, World War One was just very, it was a crazy war. A lot of things happened. A lot of soldiers got sick or they were scarred for life. So it talks about that subject, and just how love conquers all. It's a really great book. It's kind of aimed towards young adult, but I think any person of any age will enjoy it, i.e. me. And I really enjoyed it for that historical approach. I didn't think I was going to like it because of the Greek god talk. But it turned out it was a very, very good book. So, yes, pick it up if you are interested. I gave it a Goodreads rating of 4, but I think I would bump it up to 4.5 stars, maybe even 5. I might have to do a reread again just to reevaluate it. However, it was a very good read. So that is Lovely War by Julie Berry. All right, so those are the books I read. Well, some of the books I read the last 2 months. Let me know in the comments below if you have read any of these books, what your thoughts are. And if you haven't read any of them, I do recommend going out and at least giving them a shot. Honestly, I'm just one person. My opinion is going to be different from everybody else's, and I don't want to deter you from picking up a book if it is actually something you might like. So, yes, thank you for tuning in and hanging in there as I'm working through life. All right, guys, take care. Bye.